Hello and welcome to the Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau Rights Here, Right Now podcast. My name is Emily and I'm one of the advisors here at CAB. And joining me today, I have Jenna, who's our Welfare Rights Advisor. Today we're going to cover disability benefits. So we're going to look at the benefits that are available to those who are living with a disability or a health condition. We're going to break those down, look a little bit at the application process. So let's get started. So I think, Jenna, we should start off with the working age disability benefit. And then we can go on to discuss the one that's available for those over state pension age. And then we'll conclude by discussing child disability payment.
That sounds good to me.
So we'll start off by discussing personal independence payment, or PIP, as we're going to refer to it. I just want to mention just now that we're going to cover PIP today because at the moment it is the relevant benefit for working age people. But on the 29th of August this year, it is going to be moved over to become a devolved benefit. So it will be taken over by Social Security Scotland, and the benefit will then be called adult disability payment. So it is a different benefit. However, the application process, the descriptors that are used are very similar. So what will happen is anybody making a new claim in Scotland from the 29th of August will need to make a claim for adult disability payment through Social Security Scotland. Those who are currently getting PIP will continue to do so and will eventually be automatically migrated over. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit because PIP has different components and different rates. So Jenna, could you explain those a little bit for me?
Okay, there's two different components to PIP. One is the daily living component, which people are more familiar sometimes with the old DLA care component. It's about help you need day to day, and the mobility component, which is about your mobility. It's about your ability to get from A to B, basically. There are different rates within each component. With daily living, there's the standard rate, which is £61.85 per week, and the enhanced rate, which is worth £92.40 per week. There's the standard rate mobility, which is £24.45, and enhanced rate mobility, which is £64.50 per week. And you can get one without the other, or both.
So how do they assess which components you're entitled to and which rates you should get?
Well, PIP is a points-based system. There's a set of activities for each component, 10 for daily living and 2 for mobility. The activities are then broken down into descriptors with a set number of points attached to each, depending on the level of difficulty that you have. You need to score 8 points in total to get the standard rate of either component, or 12 points for the enhanced rate. You can't combine points across the different components, so if you get 4 points for each, there's no award.
Yes, so you can't get 4 points for daily living and 4 points for mobility and combine that to make an overall 8 point making an entitlement. You have to get 8 in either.
Yeah, the points stay in their own categories, basically.
Okay. So you mentioned that they use descriptors. Could you maybe give me some examples of the descriptors that they use?
For daily living, the activities cover tasks relating to personal care, interacting with others, budgeting. There's 10 of them. I'm not going to list them all, but they're tasks that relate to your daily functions, basically. It's really important to look at each activity properly, which is why I would recommend going to a CAB if you're applying for PIP. So preparing and cooking a meal is the first activity under the daily living component. It looks at your ability to prepare and cook a meal for one person from scratch. If you need to use aids or appliances, such as a perching stool or a kettle swing, you can get 2 points. If you're unable to cook at all, you get 8 points. It doesn't matter if you actually have the aids or appliances or somebody to prompt you and encourage you, for example. It's about whether you would reasonably require that. The difficulty must arise from a health condition or disability. So if you don't cook because you've never learned or you just aren't interested, you're not going to get any points. If you were unable to learn due to a learning disability or cognitive difficulty, you should score points. Lots of people with disabilities find ways to adapt when it comes to managing their lives, and think that they don't meet the descriptors as a result. So, if, for example, if you live at home, even if you're disabled, you probably will have to cook for yourself out of necessity. But if this causes you significant pain or distress, you should still get points for it. And with the mobility component, there are only two activities: the ability to plan and follow a journey, and the ability to physically stand and then move a certain distance.
Okay, so as you said with the cooking example, it's not necessarily that you can't cook or you don't cook, because often people do find ways to manage, although it may be difficult, it may be painful for them, and they are
Mhm.
still standing and cooking a meal from scratch. It's about what assistance you need and how that condition makes it difficult for you to do that.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so from what you've said, it's kind of seeming to me that it's quite physically based, but I think that's maybe a misconception that a lot of people have with PIP.
That's absolutely right. It's something I hear a lot. Whenever PIP is mentioned, people say, "Oh, it's not for mental health." There is a public perception of that just isn't true at all. Many of the activities look at whether you need prompting or encouragement to do a task, such as cooking or showering, which is particularly relevant for people, with depression or all sorts of problems where you might lack motivation. Some of the activities are entirely about mental and cognitive health issues, for example, engaging with other people for daily living or planning and following journeys under the mobility component. So please don't be put off if your conditions are only, not, I don't mean only, but if you have mental health conditions or cognitive based problems, please don't let that put you off claiming PIP.
Yeah, they're absolutely just as relevant as a physical disability, and the descriptors are designed in a way that those can be considered in your application as well.
Yeah.
So, how do you apply for PIP?
You can apply by calling the PIP new claims number, which is 0800 917 2222. They'll send you a PIP2 form called How Your Disability Affects You. You can get help with completing this from your local CAB. I've said it before, I'll say I really would recommend that because the advisors will be experienced in filling out these forms and the types of questions to ask. And again, it's kind of, if you're doing it for yourself, it can be very, very difficult to see the difficulties that you might have from your disability because you're actually living in that situation. If that makes sense, you're just getting on with things rather than thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You might be asked to attend a medical assessment, and any other evidence that you provide, such as doctor's letters, for example, would also be taken into account when the decision maker is deciding whether or not you're entitled.
Okay, so you've talked about the form, and I think it's really important to highlight that it is quite a long and complex form, and that's exactly
Mhm.
why we recommend going to your local CAB for assistance in filling it out. Not just because the form's quite complex, but because, as you said, some people have developed ways of managing so they don't really pick up on how much their condition affects them. So we can ask the right questions to prompt you to think in the right way to be able to get as much detail down on the form as possible, which gives you the best chance of having an award made the first time.
Exactly. And if I could just, as an example of, you've said the forms are quite lengthy. When we're booking an appointment at CAB for this, we generally leave about 3 hours. So
Mhm.
that should give you an indication of how complex these forms actually are.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's also important to highlight you mentioned that you should apply by calling the PIP number. Um, I think it's really important to highlight that this phone call is what triggers your claim. So that means that your award will be backdated to the day that you made the phone call. Not only is the form quite lengthy, but the amount of time that you need to wait to find out whether an award has been made is also quite lengthy. So it's really good to make that phone call and know that although you might have to wait quite a long time to get an award, it should be backdated.
And that's right.
So if you complete the form and you attend the assessment and you get a letter that you don't agree with the award that you've been given, what can you do?
You can challenge the decision. You have to ask the DWP to change the decision first. This is called a mandatory reconsideration. You need to explain why you disagree. Again, it's best to get help from your Citizens Advice Bureau with this.
And I know that, so that's the mandatory reconsideration, which is the first stage in challenging
Mhm.
the decision. I know that you can take it further, and you can appeal it again if you get an answer that you don't agree with. But that is definitely your area of expertise, and it's such a big topic. So we are going to cover that in a later episode. We're going to look at what does the appeal process look like, and kind of what are the steps going beyond the point where you've been given your decision and you disagree with it. Again, you've mentioned that it's really good to get help from CAB with this, and I think that's really key. What we can do is look at the points that you've been given, the points that you've not been given, and the reasons why they've made this decision, and basically break that down and set out a really clear argument for you as to why you and we as your representative disagree with that decision, so that we can really spell it out to the DWP again to give you the best chance of having that decision overturned.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okie doke. So that's just a kind of whistle stop of PIP. As I said, it is quite a complex benefit. The application form is quite complicated, and it can be quite a lengthy application process. So if you're considering applying for PIP, or you've made the phone call and you've got a form, the best thing that you can do is get in touch with your local CAB. We can help you and we can take you right through the process. So next we're going to move on to discuss attendance allowance, which is the disability benefit that's available for those who are over state pension age. Now, am I right in thinking, Jenna, that this is different to PIP because it only has one component?
That's right. There's no mobility component with attendance allowance.
Okay, and are there still two different rates for this?
Yep, there's the standard rate, which is £61.85, and the higher rate, which is £92.40 per week.
Okay, so what criteria will they be looking at for attendance allowance application?
With attendance allowance, there's no points-based system like there is with PIP. To be entitled, you need to meet what's called the disability test. To pass the daytime test, you must need frequent attention throughout the day in connection with your bodily functions, or someone to supervise you to prevent harm to yourself or others. To pass the nighttime test, you must need prolonged or repeated attention with your bodily functions during the night, or someone to be awake to supervise you for a prolonged or repeated period.
And to get the enhanced rate, how often or how much attendance do you require?
For the enhanced rate or higher rate, you need to pass the daytime and nighttime conditions. So you would need either help with your bodily functions or supervision to keep yourself safe throughout both the day and night.
Okay, so it seems like for attendance allowance, there is a higher threshold for the level of care that you need. Would I be right in saying that?
I'm not too sure about that because it's assessed very differently.
Mhm.
In some ways, there's a little bit more way because you don't have to meet the very specific boxes or descriptors under the PIP format, for
Mhm.
example. So there can be a little bit more leeway with it, I think.
Okay. And how do you apply for attendance allowance?
Call the new claims number on 0800 731 0122. The process is quite similar to PIP. You'll be sent a form to complete and you might be asked to attend a medical assessment, and you should send any supporting evidence that you have.
And again, I think we should highlight that you should definitely get in contact with your local CAB if you can. If you're considering that you might be entitled to attendance allowance, we can talk you through it and help you see if you are. We can help you to fill in the form. We can support you through the process. That's what we're here to do. Um, Again, just want to briefly mention, if you get your decision and you don't agree with it, then you can do a mandatory reconsideration. You can ask them to reconsider their decision. Um, Again, it's best to come to CAB for this because we can really break it down and try and make as strong an argument as possible as to why we don't agree with their decision. Okay, finally, let's discuss child disability payment, which is the disability benefit for people under 18 in Scotland. Now, this benefit is relatively new as it has replaced disability living allowance in Scotland. Disability living allowance was the previous benefit, and it has now been replaced by child disability payment. Child disability payment is now managed by Social Security Scotland, but the rates are the same. Any new claims should be made to Social Security Scotland and should be made for child disability payment and not DLA. For those who are currently getting DLA, they will automatically be migrated over in time, so they don't need to worry about doing anything for that. So can you break child disability payment down for me a little bit? What are the components and rates for this benefit?
With child disability payment, there's a care component and a mobility component. The care component has 3 rates, lowest, middle and highest, and the mobility component has 2, lower and higher rate. The care component is for children aged 3 months or older unless they're terminally ill. The lower mobility component is only available to children aged 5 and over, and the higher is available to children aged 3 and over.
Okay, so this one has 3 different rates.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit confusing.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so PIP has 2 components and 2 rates. Attendance allowance has 1 component and 2 rates, and child disability payment has 2 components with 3 rates each.
3 rates for care and 2 rates for mobility. So
Of course,
5
yeah. Sorry,
rates
that's
within
my
2
mistake.
components. No, that's fine. It is confusing.
It is confusing indeed.
Mhm.
So what are they looking to assess for child disability payment?
Again, this one isn't a points-based system. So they're looking at this kind of criteria, which is need supervision with bodily functions or ability to get around. But it's important to remember that that's relevant to the or relative to the child's age. So the test is whether the child needs help in excess of what a child the same age with the disability or health condition would need. So, I mean, a 6-year-old, for example, you'd expect a 6-year-old is going to need supervision. All 6-year-olds are going to need some level of supervision. A child with ADHD or autism might need a significantly higher level of supervision than another 6-year-old. So that's what you need to consider with it. The rates for the care component depend on the level of assistance or supervision that the child needs and whether this is during the day, night, or both. As you've already pointed out, there are quite a few different rates within the components, so I'm not wanting to spend too much time going into that. The lower rate mobility component, though, that's paid to children over the age of 5 who require substantially more guidance and supervision outside than another child that age without a disability. The higher rate mobility component is paid to children who are unable or virtually unable to walk, or children who are entitled to the highest rate care component and meet the severe mental impairment test, which again is quite a complex area. And if you think that applies, speak to your Citizens Advice Bureau, who should be able to keep you right.
Okay, so the way that they're assessing child disability payment is they're using a comparator, so a kind of a child with no disability of the same age, and looking at the
Mm-hmm.
differences. I guess that's the fair way to do it because obviously
Mm-hmm.
children's development changes as they get older. So using a child of the same age and what is the difference?
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think it's important to highlight that you don't necessarily need to have a diagnosis of a specific condition to apply for this benefit. You don't need a doctor's letter stating that, my child has this certain illness or disability, because some
Mm-hmm.
illnesses and disabilities in children can take a really long time to diagnose, and it's a long process.
That's right. That's true for all 3 of the disability benefits. So
Okay.
with PIP and attendance allowance and the child disability payment, you don't actually need an official diagnosis.
So I think, as you say, it's true of all of the disability benefits, but I think particularly with children, it can be quite difficult to diagnose things, particularly in young children.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to have that, but it can be helpful to have any doctor's letters, child's plans, things like that, things that describe their needs and their condition can be really helpful to send as evidence, and you can send them along with your application to assist the decision maker in really understanding your child's circumstances.
Yeah, generally, the more information they have, the easier it will be for them to make a decision or to make the correct decision quickly.
And to apply for this benefit, it's slightly different. You can apply for this via the Social Security Scotland website. Again, it's quite a lengthy form, but you can do it online or you can request a paper form as well. Again, sending supporting evidence is really good. The more information that you can give them, the better.
That's right. You can also phone though if you need to make the claim. It's 0800 182 2222.
Okie doke. So yeah, so there's a few ways of doing this. You can either phone, you can print out the paper form, or you can do the online application.
That's true. It's important to remember though, if you're just printing out the form, you won't necessarily be paid from the day you're printing out the form. Whereas if you phone the number or do the application online, the date of claim is, as you've already mentioned, the day you make that phone call or
Yeah.
do the online form.
Yeah, so it saves that kind of period of time where the form's on its way to you in the post. It saves you kind of losing out on money by doing it that way. So yeah, recommendation would be to either phone for a paper form or start the online application, because that triggers your claim. And again, that's the day you'll get your money paid from.
That's right.
Perfect. So anything else that you would like to cover, Jenna?
I suppose something I probably should have mentioned at the top is that all three of these disability benefits are not means tested and they're not based on your national insurance contributions. It's possible to get PIP while you're working or claiming other benefits. If you've got a high level of savings or income coming into the household, for example, that would mean you're not entitled to benefits. That's just not looked at all with the disability benefits. Some of the other things I think are important to mention are the backwards and forwards tests or conditions. Although you don't need a diagnosis to claim the disability benefits, you do need to have been affected by your conditions for at least 3 months, and then for the next 6 months for attendance allowance or child disability payment, or 9 months for PIP. Obviously, nobody knows what's going to happen with their health in the next 6 to 9 months, but it needs to be sort of reasonable to assume that your condition is still going to affect you.
Okay.
So a sprained ankle, for example, is probably not going to get you anything.
Okay. So they're looking backwards by 3 months. So have you had this condition, and has this condition affected you for 3 months backwards from the day that you claim? And then is it going to continue to affect you for 6 months in the case of attendance allowance and child disability payment, or 9 months in the case of PIP? So is this a long-term condition, really?
Yes, you don't need to actually wait the 3 months to claim, though. If you diagnosed with something and you know it's going to be affecting you long term, then you can claim immediately, but you won't be entitled to any money for the first 3 months.
Okay.
Okay. A couple of other things. If you're terminally ill, your claim will come under what's known as special rules. Your claim should be fast tracked by the DWP, and you'll automatically qualify for the highest rate care component or enhanced rate daily living component, depending on which benefit it is. And the other important thing to remember is that some entitlements to the benefits we've discussed can lead to what we call additional gains. For example, you might be entitled to extra premiums if you're on certain means tested benefits, or somebody else might be able to claim carer's allowance for you. You might be eligible for a blue badge, exemption from road tax, discounts with home repairs, and lots more. So it's always worth checking these out.
Okay. So just to kind of reiterate what we've talked through, I know that there's quite a lot of information that goes with these benefits, and they can be quite complex and difficult to understand. So the benefit that's available for working age people is currently personal independence payment, and it will be the same until the 29th of August, when it will move over to be adult disability payment, run by Social Security Scotland. If you think that you might be entitled to PIP, the best thing that you can do is get in touch with your local Citizens Advice Bureau. They can talk you through some of the descriptors and help you understand what PIP are looking at to see if you might be entitled to anything. And then once you've made the call and got a form, we can help you to fill in the form, and we can help you through the rest of the process. The same really goes for attendance allowance and for child disability payments. The best thing that you can do is seek advice, talk through your entitlement, see where you are, and then we can help you to fill out the form and start the process and support you through that process as well.
Exactly. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to help. So please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to wrap it up for today. If anybody has any questions off the back of listening to this podcast, please get in touch with us at Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau. Our number is 01349 883 333. We'd also like to ask that if there are any topics that you would like us to cover in our podcast, you can put a message on our Facebook page, you can drop a comment below our YouTube podcast, or you can email us at advisor@allnesscab.casonline.org.uk. We're really happy to take suggestions. We want to cover things that people want to learn about, so please get in touch with us if you have a topic that you'd like us to cover. Aside from that, I think that's us for today, Jenna. Thank you very much for joining me and helping me kind of understand these really complex benefits.
Thanks for having me back.
If that's it for today, then all that's left to say is goodbye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.